Let me extend on behalf of the team a huge welcome to you this sunny Thursday morning, and we are so grateful to you carving out your time. For those of you with us this morning, a massive welcome. There may be some people who are also watching back on the recording, and please be assured that we are prayerfully championing you this morning as you lead your time. Been in touch with us to say that happens on a Thursday morning, so we are really cheering you on this morning. But welcome to this, our Talking Toddlers webinar. We really pray that this will both resource and equip and inspire and encourage you as we look at this really important season of looking ahead now to Easter. And we've entitled this webinar this morning as looking at Easter, the mission opportunities that come out of it, and looking from loss to hope, because of course that's what we see, isn't it, in the big story of Easter. I don't know about you, but Easter is one of my favourite times of year, and Easter Day probably, whilst I'm a big birthday person as well, but Easter Day actually excites me more than any other day of the year, because whilst Christmas is great, whilst other celebrations in our Christian, it all points towards Easter, doesn't it? And that absolutely amazing, powerful smashing of the grave, and that absolute story of looking at going from loss to hope. So we hope you'll be encouraged this morning. Let me introduce myself just as we go forward. My name is Rachel Heffer. I serve as Head of Mission at the Evangelical Alliance, and also joined this morning by the team, not just from EA, but of Hope Together. So we have with us the wonderful Rachel Jordan-Wolf. Morning, Rachel.
Morning, Rachel. I'm the Executive Director of Hope Together, and it's an absolute joy to be with you all this morning.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. And we're also joined by Sammy Jordan, our wonderful toddler expert as well, who's with us. Morning, Sammy. How are you?
Morning, Rachel. It's a while since I've been described as toddler expert. I work at Hope with Rachel, but yes, I did lead a toddler group for 12 years, and it's very strange for me not to be planning a toddler group Easter.
We were just talking before many of you arrived, friends, about World Book Day, and I wonder how many of you might have little children that you've packed off to school this morning in all manner of costumes. I hope it went well for you. So, as we said, to get started, we're looking ahead to Easter. What an amazing missional opportunity when we have people coming into our toddler groups. They're expecting to hear about the Bible stories because so many of our groups are based in church buildings. And the Talking Toddlers research tells us a lot about how we can really maximise and make the most of bringing the good news and sharing Jesus to those who bring their children along into our contexts and settings. So Rachel, let me hand to you. Tell us a little bit, if we cast our minds right back, it was May 2020, wasn't it? Just as we went into COVID, we launched the Talking Toddlers research, but some really powerful nuggets which resonated with us both then and now. So why not give us a refresher as to some of those core bits from the research? Thanks.
Fabulous. It's a joy to be with you, and we love research because it's really helped us. It's helped us, if you like, to do the whole Talking Toddler project came because we saw the power of what you are all involved in for the mission of the church. 74% of all the parents with children under the age of 5 are in touch with a church. And the vast majority of those, it is regular contact. So that means, like, of our whole generation, we have got a 74% reach. If 86% of those families came regularly, so that is by far the vast majority, which means that we've got the opportunity to impact our whole generation. 55% of the non-Christian parents of under 5s who attended these activities said it also helped them explore their faith. So we want to help the children under the age of 4 to explore their faith. We want to help the adults who bring the children to stop and pause and think about faith. 40% of practicing Christians came to faith under the age of 5 years old, which is massive. So a massive number of people are coming to faith before the age of 5. And 27% of all these families and people, they would attend an annual festival. So that means they'll even probably come to your church services, as well as coming to the things that you are doing in your toddler group. You've probably had some of these stats before. You've probably heard, because if you've come to this webinar before, you will have seen these statistics. But we just want you to see them again, because every time what we want to do is help you remember how important what you do is and the impact it can have. So it's 74% of all the parents with children under the 5 have contact with us, the local church. That's fabulous. I'm going to stop there. That's the starter. And then we have done some research called Talking Jesus. We did this at the beginning of the year this year. And that also helps us to focus in on why this work is so important. And so I'm going to hand back to Rachel, who's going to look through a few of those statistics.
Thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel said, UK-wide research is really important, isn't it? Because it just helps inform us as to why we're doing what we're doing and how we can do that in a really effective way. And so, as Rachel said, a 6-way partnership of us launched the Talking Jesus research, again looking at non-Christians' perceptions of the church and of Jesus. And here's some of the important findings which we felt hopefully would inspire and equip you, as it has done us, as we found out what the UK thinks. So if we can flick through some of our slides, as you can see here slide, when we asked practicing Christians to reflect back and think, how was it, what were the biggest influences themselves coming to, this is what we found. That the top answer was that 34% of people said that growing up in a Christian family and having that influence on them was really impactful. So it just shows that in our churches, in our context, actually that family involvement, family discipleship piece is really important. It also said, if we break down, if we can go to the next slide, please, where we see young people being hugely impacted, again, by that nurturing, that input, we see here that, as you can see there, looking at this, that the vast majority of practicing Christians said that they came to faith, to the Christian faith, knowledge and encounter with Jesus under the age of 18. And if we break this down further, as you can see, our toddler group age bracket there, that 5% of people said that actually they made a commitment to Jesus, whatever that looks like, but at a very young age. And I know that our own Rachel Jordan-Wolf would say that she's in that bracket, that actually because of the influence of toddler groups, of people impacting on their lives, just as our Talking Toddlers research showed, actually it was a really pivotal age of people coming to faith as a child, as a toddler, or in their early years. So we see that on that previous slide, being part of a Christian context, a Christian family is really impactful on people coming to faith. If you can go to the next slide, let's look at also, again, just the importance of relationships, the relationships that we hold with many of those families. When we ask non-Christians, do you know a practicing Christian? This is what we found, that 53% of people said that they did know somebody who they knew to be a Christian. There is a bit of an alert around this, in that 7 years ago when we first conducted this research, it was actually 68%. So there's a real challenge to us to actually make ourselves known as overtly Christian within our toddler group context as well. But if they know us, they know us well. We're a friend, we're a family member, always somebody that comes into their sphere of any given week, like in a toddler group context. Next slide, please. This is also really interesting and hopefully resonates with you. When we asked people what might be the main question that you're asking, we found this, that aside from what will make me happy or what happens when I die, which are our second and third answers, the top question that people across the UK told us in this research they were asking was this: will everything be okay? Isn't that interesting? I wonder if you resonate with that. Families that you meet with, this sense of living on the edge, the unsettledness of COVID, of the threat of war, of the Queen dying, now the cost of living crisis. Actually, what it tells us is the families that we engage with, many of the children, the teenagers, the very young children too, they're aware of this unsettled nature. Will everything be okay? And yet we know that as Christians, being intentional in our outreach and our mission to these wonderful families that we engage with, actually we know that, again, in the mess, the grime, the busyness, the anxiety of life, I know that particularly as we point towards Easter, we know that we have a steadfast, faithful God who brings such hope and light into our situations, not just at Easter time, but throughout the year. Next slide, please. So really interesting that as we think of that context, will everything be okay? Actually, Anna, let's stop the slide there because we don't need to go into other aspects of the Talking Jesus research, which if you're interested, there's loads more in there that could really equip and inspire you. But just lastly to say, against that backdrop of the will everything be okay, the other stat that we did find amazingly encouraging, and hopefully for you too, is that 1 in 3 non-Christians told us that where they'd ventured into some sort of conversation with a practicing Christian that they knew, that actually they were really interested to go again to find out more and to go deeper. So as I hand over to Sammy, I hope that just encourage you to think these people that come to us, and we're blessed by having folks in our community, actually there's a great openness. There is the underpinning of this anxiety and the will everything be okay, but what an amazing opportunity we have to speak into that.
So I said to you, if those of you that came on here early, that you are some of the most important people in the church right now, because young families is our biggest window of missional opportunity, because most people come to faith when they're a child, because 3/4 of parents in the UK have a connection with a church through activities for their under 5, and that most often is a toddler group. And a toddler group at Easter, Talking Jesus, 45% of people believe in the resurrection in some way. So it means you are really well placed at Easter to explore the Easter story with your young families. And that's what we want to resource and encourage and equip you for this morning. But we recognise that Easter is a different proposition to Christmas. Christmas, schools are full of nativities, it's the cute baby, you wear a tea towel on your head. There's the R factor. The Easter story is harder to tell, it's less familiar, it's much grittier. It deals with big issues of loss as well as hope. And that's what we want to focus on this morning. How can we address these really big issues with our youngest families, many of whom are not connected with the church? How do we address the issues, and actually what might be some really good resources to share the Easter story with them? Because we have this context of a toddler group, this relational context of trust and familiarity, where actually it might be a safe place to acknowledge the difficulty of some of these issues, validate some of the hard feelings around it, and have a conversation about them. So we have got two brilliant people to speak into this for you this morning. We have got Charlotte Nobbs, who is the children's advisor for Peterborough Diocese. Charlotte has run a toddler group. She's been a primary school teacher. She's going to appear on video because she couldn't be with us today. And we've got Ed Drew from Faith in Kids. Both Charlotte and Ed are regulars at Talking Toddlers. And what's really exciting today is instead of filling the chat with their good ideas, you're going to hear directly from them. What we would like to be filled of the chat, though, is with your ideas and with your questions. Later on, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. So if you've got any suggestions and resources that you know work well when sharing the Easter story with our youngest families, pop them in the chat. We'd love to hear. This is a hive mind. The best resources are always in the room. And if you've got a question for Ed or myself or any of the rest of us later, then please pop that in the chat later and we'll have time to discuss those. I'm going to hand over to Rachel again now, because it's time to put you in your first breakout rooms.
Brilliant, thanks Sammy. So lots in store, but we'd love to start with you. So as we go straight into our small breakout rooms now, what I'd love you to just briefly share with each other is obviously who you are, where you're from, but why not just spend a minute or two just saying, how are you doing? How has this term been for you so far? And secondly, we'd love you to share, if you've got Easter thoughts and plans in mind, what might be the one thing that you'd love to share with somebody else? If somebody in your group could take a little note and put those in the chat for us, we'd love to have a list that we can circulate afterwards with people's top tips or ideas as to what you're doing. Okay, so we'll go into our breakout rooms now. We've just got a few minutes in those together, but enjoy getting to know each other and sharing those ideas. Well, welcome back. I think we're all hopefully back from our breakout rooms. Brilliant. I hope you enjoyed getting to know each other, introducing yourselves. Certainly the group that I was in, again, there was a real mix of people within our group, just looking at some who are charging ahead with lots of ideas for Easter, others of us on this call because we just want some new, fresh, creative inspiration. So what better place to be? Hopefully you'll all go away with lots of nuggets of thoughts. A couple of things that came from our breakout rooms, and as I share a few, please do put some of your ideas into the chat, because people, again, it would serve us all to have new ideas to go away with. But what we heard was about how the intentionality around Easter, particularly working with very little ones, was actually to be super conscious, as I'm sure we are, of the listening ears ears of adults. Rachel shared, didn't she, the 55% of people, adults themselves, who said that their own faith had been challenged or changed as a result of being in a distinctively Christian environment within a toddler group. So we were talking a little bit about the stories that you share around Easter and how actually we're really conscious of adults listening in. There was a mention of godly play, using lots of sensory things for little ones to engage with different stations of the Easter story, different phases. Script union, resourceful stages of Easter was mentioned, and some really good ideas around actually approaching. One of the members in our group said they'd approached Tesco, who were more than happy to actually be distributing and providing Easter eggs, as long as they could have a photo of the group at some point. So we were saying, actually, yeah, think of who your local corner shops or so on, others bigger like Tesco, who might be able to serve your group. So some really good ideas, but please be filtering your suggestions into the chat. And on that note, let's pause and hand over to Sammy, who's going to introduce our first speaker for us. Thanks, Sammy.
So, as I said before, we have got Ed and Charlotte with us this morning to inspire and equip and enthuse us about how to tackle the Easter story with our young families. And in a minute, Anna's going to play a video recording of myself with Charlotte Nobbs. We recorded it last week when neither of us thought we could be here. Charlotte still can't. So Charlotte is the children's advisor for Peterborough Diocese. She's led a toddler group for many years. She's been a primary school teacher, and she's going to talk us through how she handles these themes of loss and hope in the Easter story with toddler group families, and some of her top tips for resourcing this Easter opportunity. Anna, if you can play the video, that would be amazing. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you today, but I am delighted that Charlotte Nobbs and I had a chance to catch up before today's webinar. We really wanted to have Charlotte kind of in the room as much as you can do on Zoom with us, but Charlotte couldn't be with you either. So I've caught up with Charlotte in advance. Now, the reason I'm really excited about having Charlotte with us, Charlotte is the children's lead for Peterborough Diocese, but normally when we're doing Talking Toddlers, Charlotte is one of those people that is populating our chat with just the most fantastic and creative but doable and practical ideas. And so now we've taken her out of the chat and you get to see her, okay, and she's going to share her kind of experience and her wisdom on Easter as this journey from loss to hope with us. So Charlotte, thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the time to record this. You probably want to give us a little bit more of an introduction so people have a sense of who you are and what equips you to be talking about Easter and this journey of loss and hope today.
It's such a real privilege to be here today. I'm really delighted to be asked to contribute to this. So I guess the thing that I suppose qualifies me to be here is nothing other than I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm a teacher by profession before I did the job that I did now, but for about 20 years I just volunteered full-time in church doing children's stuff. I have 4 children of my own, and Toddlers was the place that I just loved, and loved being with families. And I suppose as much as anything, I loved Toddlers because I could be creative. It was one of those places where you could try new things out. So that's why I'm here today, I guess.
Thank you, Charlotte. So primary school teacher, church volunteer for over 20 years with a kind of particular heart for toddlers, and now the children's lead for Peterborough Diocese. So I think we can understand why you're here and not just in the chat today. So I think you're going to start off talking about your experience of using the Easter story with people with a story. So I'm going to hand over to you.
So this happened quite a few years ago. I was telling the Easter story in our toddler group, and we were doing it through a puppet show with lots of crafts and fun activities beforehand, and then the children would sit down and we would watch the show. And a mum who I knew really well, who was also a childminder, came up to me and she said, "Charlotte, do you have to speak about death?" our kids are just too young. Why talk about something that really they shouldn't be worrying about? Surely we should be protecting them from this stuff. Why are you doing this? And the backstory for this lady was that her own daughter had died a few years before, and it was still so raw and so painful. And I knew her well enough to talk with her and talk about her daughter a bit and just to acknowledge that awful loss. But at the same time, I was able to say to her, but you know, this is a story of hope. It's unlike any other. It's something that we believe that's going to help our children, and hopefully a way to go upstream, preparing them for something that is going to happen to them downstream. Someone will die in their lives, and we are going to have to prepare them for that. And this story says that death is not the end. The end is meeting with Jesus, who has everything in hand. And however much it is a painful story, it is a story that I just think is worth telling. Now, I can't say she went, oh, hallelujah, great. It was more like, oh, okay then. And she continued coming and was one of our regulars. It didn't put her off, but I was really glad that she felt able to speak to me about it. I think one of the most important things about the Easter story is to share the story well. And I've got a few tips that are my go-to tips, and I hope that they'll be useful for you. I expect you have wonderful tips as well. Perhaps you could put them in the chat, but these are my tips and just see how you do. First of all, don't linger in Jesus's suffering, how it hurt, or imagine how heavy that cross was. And the reason I say that is we just don't know quite where the child is in their development, but even more, we don't know how comfortable the parent has been about talking about death to their child, or how comfortable they are about us talking about death. So it's really important that we talk about death, but we just don't linger in the pain of it. Secondly, I would say try to set Jesus's death in the context of something like this, because you've got to give some explanation for why he died. So I would say something like, everyone loved Jesus because he loved everyone like God. But there were just a few people who were jealous of him because he had so many friends and they just wanted to stop him. Now, can I just say, don't say there were people who were Jews or people who were Roman soldiers. We don't want to kind of create any kind of racism. I would just talk about people. And then I would say that those people hung him on the cross. The sky went dark. Jesus spoke to God, his dad, his father, and then he died. Now, can I just say, don't ever finish the story there. And I know traditionally, particularly in Church of England churches and some of the more traditional churches, we used to rely on a culture of people coming to church on Good Friday, walking through Saturday, and then coming to church on Easter Day. But the reality is that most families are not going to come to us on Easter Day. And we cannot just leave Jesus hanging dead on a cross or wrapped up in a tomb, because actually there's no good news there. There's none. And there's, I think, even a kind of sinister message that children could pick up, which might be doing good might end in me dying. And I think we have to be very careful about what we do when we get to that part of the story. So always make sure you talk about the resurrection. Always make sure you do a big thing about Jesus coming alive again and meeting his friends and wanting to meet us as well. Now, I have a song, and I'm not a great musician, but it's a go-to song by a wonderful lady called Julia Plort. And her songs, I mean, you're going to use them in your toddler group. If you listen to her songs, you're going to want them, because they are musically really lovely. They're done with a bit of orchestral music, so it sounds so much better than when I sing it. But I'm going to sing it to you because it's a kind of creedal song that tells a story from the beginning to the end. So this is it. Forgive my singing lack of talent and just roll with me. It goes like this. Oh, what a sad day when the angry leaders killed Jesus. Oh, what a sad day when they laid his body in the tomb. But one day later, tick-tock, tick-tock. 2 days later, tick-tock, tick-tock. On the third day, God's mighty power changed death to life, and Jesus came to live again. Jumping, jumping, jumping for joy. And it goes on like that. And it's the most beautiful song with children jumping, being happy, crouching down low, doing the picture of the cross, putting Jesus in the tomb, but they know the end of the story. And I would really encourage you to be singing this song, I think, way before Easter, so that by the time we get to Easter and we do talk about death and they see a cross, they already know what's going to happen. And that's what we want, really. We really want that to be the case. You might like to adapt some nursery rhymes and sing it that way. You might like the Colin Buchanan song, Boss of the Cross. There are some really good songs that we'll pop in the chat for you to have a look at. But be brave. Just take a nursery rhyme, change some of the words, make sure you tell the whole story. I'm going to tell you a little story now about a lad called Samuel. He was 3 years old, and he was really impacted by the Easter story. And I'll tell you what he was doing. He had suddenly realised that old people die, and he was looking at wrinkly faces. And he was saying things like touching his granny's face and looking at it and saying, "You're old, aren't you? Are you going to die?" And his mum was just mortified. But it's one of those things that 3-year-olds will do. And then on top of this, he had worked out that death meant absence. And so if people were turning up at church as he had expected, but one of them was missing, he would automatically jump to, if Joan wasn't here, is Joan dead or has Joan died? Because he realised that absence might mean death. And his brother and sister, who were older, were absolutely mortified by this. And I was saying to Sammy, I don't know at what age it becomes a difficult thing to say, can we talk about death? It seems strange that that would be the case, because I think it's a real shame, because these are ultimate big questions that should always be out there. Anyway, at the same time as this sort of development thing going on in little Samuel, his toddler group were telling the story of Easter and what happened to Jesus. And so he then started to contextualize his experience with the Easter story. And this is what he would say. Granny is going to die, but it's gonna be okay. And he would do all these hand gestures. He said, do you know what? People took Jesus and they hung him on the cross, and he'd do a big cross. Jesus died, but 1, 2, 3 days later, Jesus came alive. And Jesus is going to meet my granny. And he would say this over and over and over again. So we can't underestimate the power of the storytelling that we do. I've got a couple of other things that I would just like to suggest. They're just little tips. One thing I feel passionately about is that our churches, particularly our traditional churches, have tombstones and death all over the place. Often those memorials on the walls or on the ground, and yet we give no signage to explain what we believe about death. And it is one of the best good news stories we have. So I was wondering what it would look like if behind the back of the pews as you walked in, or round your toddler group, you just had a few pictures up that told the story of Easter, the Easter week, so that children could follow the story with their mum or their dad or grandma or grandpa, knowing what happens, and then at the end maybe have a little kind of simple explanation of what we believe about death. So saying something like, Jesus rose on the third day, he soaked up everything that was bad, Jesus met his friends, and he loves to meet us and give us a clean start too. To find out more, ... Some of the pictures I love to use, I number so that people know what order to go in. So I love Henry Martin's pictures. They are free. I'll show you one. I don't know if you can see that, but that's Jesus going into Jerusalem on a donkey. This is one that I quite like. You might think it's a little bit too graphic, but you've got to think very carefully about what you're going to put up to show Jesus died on a cross. I think that's not a bad one as they go. And then I love this one. This is one of my favorite ones. Doesn't Jesus just look joyful? And there he is with the holes in his hands, because Jesus still carries those scars. But if we had those pictures up again, it just means families get to recognize who Jesus is. I have an adult friend who cannot read or write, and I was looking through the Sally Lloyd-Jones Bible with her and saying that she could get it as an audio version, but we were looking at the pictures and I said, who's that? And straight away she knew it was Jesus, never having read a word before, and we want children to be able to do that. And the other thing I would suggest is to have a really simple way of talking about what happened on the cross. Yes, the resurrection is wonderful and we really need to focus on that. But have we got a kind of 30 seconds of what happened on the cross that is good news? So this is how I would do it. And I use this, I think, every year and in between. So I talk about if you fall down and you get a muddy hand, and I might actually put my hand in something like a plate with brown paint, a dish with brown paint in, get it really muddy. And your mum said to you, I want you to go and wash that off with a flannel. And you go to the tap and you get your flannel. Where does all the mud go? And the children hopefully will say, on the flannel. And you'll go, yes, all over the flannel. And with the same bit of material, I'll have a cross and I'll say, that's what happened when Jesus died on the cross. He took everything from us that was not clean, all the things that have hurt us and made us sad, all the things that we've done that have made other people sad, and he's taken them all and he says, I'll wear them. And when he's cleaned us up, he then gives us a new set of clothes, just like after a bath time, ready for us to start all over again. I often carry this about in my pocket as well, as a way of just being able to explain it. I do this to adults as much as to children. It really helps parents to have something that they can talk about. And again, I'd say one of the crafts I have is I give people a bit of flannel and I say to them, cut out a cross, play about with this in the bath at bath time. And finally, my tip is, I think Samuel probably wouldn't have been able to tell that story about Jesus coming alive again, was it not for his mummy reinforcing the story at home. What about getting some of the cheap downloadable little Easter stories so that you can give them out to your parents so they could tell them at bedtime? Or, I mean, you're going to hear about a lovely Easter story from Sammy later. I really recommend that. I love those. What about just making sure that at Easter, maybe there's some people in your church who would adopt some of your toddler families and just buy them an Easter gift of a children's Bible. But I would say just being able to put the Easter story into the hands of our families so that they can be doing this stuff at home is more important probably than anything else that we do. Anyway, I hope that helps you. I hope it really helps with your planning and some of the things that you're doing. Every blessing with everything you're doing. You are fab.
And so are you, Charlotte. That's exactly why I wanted to take you out of the chat and bring you on screen. I think, you know, we can be scared of telling the Easter story with very young children. It's not got the cute baby. You don't wear a tea towel or dress up as an angel. But actually, what you have said is that we have this really massive missional opportunity to plant something in the children, to equip them for what they're going to encounter downstream. And I know that psychologists tell us that children's first experience of death is the one that they come back to for all subsequent experiences. So what if that first time that they've really encountered the language around death and a story about death is the death and resurrection of Jesus? And as you say, don't end with the cross, end with Jesus coming back to life. Thank you, Charlotte. That was so incredibly helpful. And all of Charlotte's resources will be in the chat and will also be on the mail out that we send to you later. So have a fantastic rest of the session. I hope that it's been useful. I just think Charlotte's amazing. And I'm sure you're all scribbling down lots and lots of notes, but I hope the rest of the session is just as useful and amazing too. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, you can see that I am here. I will not repeat myself. Charlotte is amazing. Her amazing ideas will be sent to you with the video link next week. But now it's time for you to go and discuss some of Charlotte's amazing ideas in another breakout room. What was useful? What might help and add to those plans that you discussed in that first breakout room? Have you got any other ideas? Keep adding those ideas and questions to the chat, but we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Excellent. Hopefully you're all back in our Zoom room and you enjoyed your breakout rooms. Thanks again, Anna. Again, hopefully you were really inspired by our brilliant Charlotte. Isn't it great to have really practical advice, top tips, shared stories? Hopefully you feel really enthused as I do as to taking some of those. In our group, we said how much we really loved the flannel. This wasn't a flannel. What was it? The sponge.
Yes.
Sponge idea of sort of wiping away, you know, the grime and so on, and shaping that into a cross, how achievable that is to give out to our families. We also talked about how some of the challenges, however, in our group. We were talking about one of our leaders is working with parents with under ones, and again, even with them being so little, how we are speaking very much to them, of course, but also very much for the listening ears of parents. We love the ideas of the pictures as well, and I'm sure you resonated with different things, but hopefully again that's equipped and inspire you with a few more practical top tips as you plan ahead. We're going to move now to hear from our wonderful second speaker, who is Ed Drew. Ed is, as Sammy said earlier, morning Ed, lovely to have you with us. Ed is a familiar face, and you may have caught Ed before as he's spoken into this Talking Toddler context. Many of you will know Ed as working as the director of Faith in Kids, and his passion there is to see, as you can see on the banners behind him, supporting church and parents in family discipleship, raising kids to really know the love of Jesus and to be impacted with a faith that will last for a lifetime. He's also the author of the Faith in Kids podcast, but also many books, Meals with Jesus, The Wonder of Easter, and various other things. And Ed, you yourself worked for 12 years, I believe, as a children's worker as well at Dundonald Church in southwest London. So loads of experience to share with us. But Ed, so grateful of your time to be with us today. Without further ado, let me hand over to you as you can share with us, particularly against this backdrop of Easter, from loss to hope. Tell us about your experience, and I'm sure you share some wisdom with us. So thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here. I love speaking to people who are involved in toddler groups. The statistics say it clearly, but also my experience says it clearly. Let me just tell you quickly 3 experiences of my last 2 or so months. One was sitting in a pub in Eastbourne, talking to 2 children's workers, and the lady who gave us our food recognised both of them and said, I remember you from taking my first child to toddler group 20 years ago, and I took all 3 of my children through the time there. Thank you so much for running it. The other time was just this week when I was walking down my local road with a colleague, and I met an old friend of mine who lives in the area. I was about to introduce them, and she said, no, we know each other from the church toddler group you used to run. All 3 of our children are now teenagers, but the 3 of us all went to the same toddler group and knew each other then. The relationships are still there. And then finally, my colleague Alex, he's my age. He's married to Hills. Hills's mother became a Christian at a toddler group. So she is now in her 60s or 70s. And what I noticed most about that story is that there wasn't Christian contact in Hills's family before then. Hills's mum would absolutely say it was the beginning of faith in their family. My colleague Alex is now married to a Christian, Hills, as a result of that toddler group. And we can even say their 3 children now, all under 10, are growing up in a Christian home because of that toddler group. That is why we're here. That is the story we believe. The Bible is clear. The culture is clear. If we start children off in their youngest years, influencing them with the stories we're telling, the Christians who are loving them, lives are changed. It's a brilliant work we're doing. That's why I'm talking about Easter now. Now, Charlotte Nobbs, I thought, did a brilliant job of telling us something of how we tell the Easter story. I thought she was brave in encouraging us that children can begin to process the story of death. And we always tell the story of the resurrection. We always say that Jesus Christ rose again. I just wanted to play you a video of an interview I did with my friend Alex. And she, again, is what you could call a toddler old-timer. Her children now are off to university. But I just took a moment to ask her experience of being in a toddler group when she wasn't a Christian. She came along to our church's toddler group when she wasn't a Christian, now about 20 years ago. And she just mentions the impact Easter had on her. So I'm just going to line that up. It's just a couple of minutes we're going to listen to.
To start with, that it was affiliated with any particular church. I'd been going to Mums and Tods since September, and then Easter was approaching, and I'd had a few invitations to go to church. I thought I was a Christian. I knew who God was. I didn't have any sort of relationship with him or Jesus. But so I was very, thank you. But then Easter was coming, and Ellie and Kate's daughter Daisy were in the same nursery, and I found myself quite put out that Easter seemed to only consist of papier-mâché bunnies. And I wanted Ellie to know more, so I asked Kate if I could bring Ellie to Sunday school. And she was absolutely thrilled, of course. And then as the conversation went on, I suddenly realised I actually couldn't drop her at Sunday school and go away again. I actually had to stay in the service. And so I did. I was reluctant to attend the church for various reasons, partly a bit scared, a bit ignorant, partly because what kind of church meets in a school, for heaven's sake, and just I didn't know whether or not I'd be expected to stand up and sit down and kneel and the routines, because over the years I've been to lots of different church services for various different reasons and have always felt completely ignorant about just the routine of it. But when I arrived, Kate met me, took me into the classroom where Ellie was going to be having her Sunday school with all the other little ones, and then sat with me in the service. And there wasn't, apart from singing, that was pretty much the only time we stood up. And the talk was really interesting. I thought, yes, I can do this. I can do this for an hour and a half every Sunday morning while Ellie's getting educated in Sunday school. That's fine. Singing's nice. I was more and more curious, and I did feel like, a real interest had sparked in my brain. I was learning something new for the first time in ages. I heard people talking about home groups and asked whether or not I could join one. And
you could find that video of Alex on our YouTube page, Faith in Kids, all one word. But she goes on to explain how she got involved in a small group, how her husband was brought along. And her husband, Dave, and Alex, they're still friends of mine. They're both Christians. And they would both be clear. Dave would be very clear. It was through his wife, her relationship. But the thing I just want to raise here is you heard her talk about Kate. Throughout, she's talking about Kate. There was an individual who looked after her. She doesn't talk so much about the toddler group. She talks about Kate. There is always a person. There is always an individual. There's always a relationship. As we come to Easter, and we may feel nervous, I do want us to leave today clear. It's not a technique we're going to get. It's not a technique we're handing on to our groups. I loved Charlotte's story of the mum who essentially was complaining about Christians banging on about the death of Jesus. Charlotte was able to say that critical phrase, I knew her well enough to say, she knew she was speaking into a relationship of love. It's absolutely fantastic, because that is the story of our toddler groups. And just to share one verse from 1 Thessalonians 2, Paul likens himself to a mother. He says, as apostles of Christ, we could have been a burden to you, but we were gentle among you like a mother caring for her little children. We loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. Paul shared his life and the gospel, and he says it's like being a mother. Mothers don't get to go to the loo on their own. They don't get to have a shower on their own. There is a little toddler with them wherever they go. Paul says he was like that with those he loved in the Thessalonian church. That is the story of a toddler group. And if we're surrounded by mothers, we absolutely get it, and they do too. We share our lives and we share the good news of Easter. And when we come across those people in our group who have a story of loss, who have a story of hurt, and perhaps Easter is the time we hear it most clearly, please let's tell those Christians who are in our teams, we don't panic, we can count to 3, and we can ask more. We can listen carefully. Because the distinctive of Christianity and Easter is love came first, before commands, before liturgy, before tradition, before the ask. Love came first. The story of Easter is Jesus died and rose again before he asked us to follow him, before he asked us to listen to him. When we're meeting people in our home groups, let's share our lives and be confident. Love comes first. That's why they're coming to our groups. I had someone in my small group who was telling me that they notice in their group the small talk disappears quickly, and they say, can you pray for me? I'm in debt. We've got a problem. I'm splitting up. Our toddler groups might be the one place in the week where people know they're loved to the point where they can be honest about their loss, honest about their difficulties. I'd just love to finish just the last 45 seconds of that same video as Alex explains the impact of her small group. Her toddler group. I just have to. Great, just there.
Still remembers the challenging questions Dave came up with, but he obviously found the answers he needed because he told Mark he'd become a Christian before he told me. The enormous value of these mums and toddlers group is to be seen, I suppose, in people like me who get brought along by a friend and exposed to this kindness, the help, the warmth, the cake, the chance then to hear in a very sort of child-friendly way about Jesus, and then have that being a stepping stone to church, and then just learning and growing, and that ripple effect with my husband. And then I introduced a friend to Mums and Toddlers, who then also did Christianity Explored and became Christian as well. So although it may seem very often that you're doing it for nothing, that's not true. I'm proof.
Well done. Keep going with your toddler group. While I have, goodness, I was just going to take you now to show you the Faith in Kids website, faithinkids.org. If you go to the website, this is what you'll find. If you click on resources, up there, there is a box here for toddler groups. And if you click in there, there is a series of resources. And my personal favorite is just further down here. There is a toddler Easter story. You can download that for free. And it just uses the Easter egg for new hope, exactly like Charlotte. I try to make more of the resurrection at Easter, and Easter eggs is an obvious way to do that in a way a toddler can understand. But you could find some other resources there that might help you in your toddler group. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rachel.
Fantastic. So now, everyone, we've got an amazing opportunity for you to ask some questions. I would love you to add some questions in the chat about anything that Ed has said, and then we're going to get Ed and Sammy in here to answer some of those questions. We've got one question already, and I've seen in the chat there's lots of different things that have been fired in there at the moment. So if you're missing out who was the songwriter, I think it was a Julia, P-L-A-U-T, Julia Plout. So if you're missing out the songwriter, that's who's there. There's some free Bible images if you're looking for images of Easter on freebibleimages.org. There was a question about a light event that somebody has been running, and somebody else answered it. It was about running a craft morning, so an Easter craft morning, and we might get someone to come and tell us a little bit more about that in a moment. There was a 1, 2, 3 Jesus is Alive song. I think we can find that again on YouTube. And Perry's Woodcrafts have empty tombs of Jesus that obviously you can do some craft exercise with. So that's exciting. Lots of stuff happening on the chat. It's been amazing having you with us. Thank you so much, and especially for that inspirational story. It's so set the tone on why we're here and what we are about, and we are so grateful to you. The first question I have for you, I don't know who wants to answer, Ed or something, is one person has put in the chat that they are doing 3 sessions on Easter, and so they want to split the story up. But what Charlotte was saying, obviously, is don't leave Jesus on a cross. Ed, have you got any top tips on what you could do if you're doing 3 sessions over the Easter period?
I think the first thing I just want to do is I would want my team to know that we're doing it. So that they're clear. The reason we're doing this is to make the most of Easter, and just for them to be praying into it, and for them to be talking to their friends, because none of us will know everyone in our toddler group. So the first thing I'd want to do is just make absolutely clear this is a team business we're doing. Can we use that really as a secret covert training operation, which is we're going to do this for 3 weeks. We're heading to Easter. Have you got the flyer for the church service we want to invite them to? Are you praying for your friends? Are you going to try and talk to them every week of the 3 weeks? And so that they're very clear, you can't do this on your own. However good your story is, it won't do all the work. But to the answer, I would absolutely do Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. Who doesn't love a donkey? Who doesn't love a crowd waving and flags and singing? I think then I would probably maybe do a meal, because the Last Supper, because it gives us a chance to eat and drink. We check on allergies first. We do that carefully. And I'd still be talking about Easter the whole time. Yeah,
great. Sammy?
I noticed that it actually, in terms of a timeline, this person wants to do 2 before Easter and 1 after. So what I've done, just like Ed, yes, we do the Jesus coming into Jerusalem on a donkey, because it's got all those connotations of donkey rides and cheering and who do we support, who do we follow, lots of following game opportunities. Then I would do Good Friday and Easter Sunday. I would do Easter in 1 session. Jesus comes alive. And then for the session after Easter, I would do one of the resurrection appearances. And the one I would do is breakfast on the beach, because many, children understand breakfast time, and Jesus being lost and then appearing at breakfast. I've done it before. You can do that quite easily with your toddler groups, and it just reinforces that message that death wasn't the end, that Jesus came back to life. He really was alive. He was talking, walking. They could hug him. He was eating. So that's how I would probably split my 3 sessions.
Maybe we could even have some breakfast, Sammy. That sounds rather good. I think a few breakfast snacks.
I have done that. We had bacon butties at toddler group 1 week as our breakfast after Easter. I have done that.
Sounds fantastic. I'm signing up. Now, there's another thing is somebody said something about local shops connecting. I don't know if you want to clarify that in the chat for me, but how could you connect with local shops? Sammy, this might be something for you. I mean, I don't know if you've got local shops in your community. How do you connect local shops, local, if you're other people, local groups and things, particularly maybe with your Easter egg hunt or things like that in the community?
I just blag it. You know, so if there is a community link on their website, sometimes they have them, I contact them beforehand. Otherwise, I go to customer services, I say who I am, who I need to talk to and what it's about. And so generally, I mean, Waitrose, I don't normally shop in Waitrose, okay? Just so you know, I'm an oldie girl. But Waitrose are generous and brilliant because they have a community budget. So they used to fund all my Easter eggs. They used to give me 360 hot cross buns, you know, for all of my Easter events with young families. Sainsbury's were a bit less generous. Waitrose, brilliant. Co-op, brilliant. You know, just go and ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. And if they know that you're doing something that's a community service that engages with lots of families in the community, and that you're willing in front of all those families to say, thank you to wait, you know, if you're next shopping in Waitrose or Tesco or Asda, insert other name of supermarket here, they'll generally give you stuff. So I used to get lots of stuff for free because I asked, and I'm not afraid to be cheeky.
Absolutely brilliant. I love it. That is some really good top tips, isn't it? I mean, if you can get free Easter eggs or free hot cross buns to give away, that is going to be an enormous bonus. So yeah, love the connecting with local shops. I thought maybe you were going to hide things in the local shops. I remember one of our Christmas Talking Toddlers, we had like pictures in shop windows or something that people went round, and maybe that I thought maybe there was going to be kind of an Easter trail. Has anyone got an Easter trail where they've connected with local shops and got people moving around the community? Sammy,
just to say, Rachel, I've done that too at Christmas and at Easter. You know, one year I had a live chocolate advent calendar. And so me going into shops, you become that familiar face, and they get used to you asking things and working together. So yeah, do become that familiar face. Shops are really up for that. Great.
Fantastic. That's really good. Are there any other burning questions that people have got? Do drop them in the chat. I was wondering if the person who was doing the craft morning would like to pop up and tell us what they're doing for their Easter craft morning. I'd have to go in the chat to work out who it was, but if you're there and you want to just start talking, we'll find you.
Yeah.
Great.
So we've done, I've actually not fully planned the Easter one yet, but we've booked it in. It's been really well attended at Christmas, and our one in October, like the opposite to Halloween, we were celebrating light. We will probably go along the theme of new life, and kind of use the opportunity to like maybe looking at animals, and we usually try and get some sensory play in there as well. So we have a lady who's just really passionate about sensory play, so she'll prepare some bits and bobs to kind of engage the really tiny ones. And for us, the best thing about it has been that we advertise it to be on a Saturday. Our toddler group's on a Monday, and so we see lots of different faces that we don't usually see on a Monday, and it enables us to invite everyone who comes to our all age service the next day, which we've seen a really good turnout from that. But yeah, we usually try and make the crafts really simple. We have about between like 8 and 10 different kind of stations, so that families can just make their way around. They're usually super easy and straightforward, but we have a volunteer at each one, and they just help to do that. And we have a little bag that each child can put all their crafts in and take home at the end of the morning. And we also just do a little prayer and kind of announce why we're doing it. So it works really well.
Great. Liz, you've got a couple of questions. Is it for all ages, and how long does your craft morning last?
We started off doing like 2 hours, and we were like, whoa, that's too long. So we've shortened it. It's about an hour and a half. It's a drop-in thing. Biscuit decorating is always the most popular one. I think, what was the other question? It was
how is it for all ages?
Yeah, so we advertise it for toddlers, so we make it really clear that it's for toddler age, but we do say that siblings are welcome, because we don't have a huge space. We have quite a limited capacity. We could probably, when we're all moving around, take about 40 bodies in the room, so not like hundreds. So we know that older ones might not want to engage as much, but we have found that the older ones are happy to go around and do the crafts as well. They do enjoy it. But just because we're being specific about who we're targeting, we do it for toddlers, but you could easily make it all age as well. Yeah.
That is brilliant. Thank you, Liz, for joining us on the spur. It's so good, isn't it? And so inspirational when we get different people's stories from what they're doing, what you're doing. And just to know, I guess, that we're all doing this together. It's an exciting movement to be a part of. And just to see what's going out, because we can reach a generation together. We can reach a generation and we can reach their parents, and we have an amazing opportunity again this Easter with people actually ready, willing and wanting to come in. And I'm loving the idea of free hot cross buns from Waitrose. Great. This brings our panel to a close. We've got a few little notices that we would love to share with you. So I think Rachel Heffer's going to jump back in, and Ed, thank you so much again for joining us. And Rachel, you're going to jump back in with a few notices, and then I've got a notice or two.
Thanks, Rachel. I saw a few thumbs up there when you mentioned about just this opportunities that we have to change a generation and to make Jesus known at this particular time. So isn't that amazing? We unite on that together across the country, wherever we are. Don't go anywhere just yet. As Rachel said, a few quick fire resources and some slides to show you if these again might serve you in your context. From us at the Evangelical Alliance, just a few things to flag up. But first and foremost, this from Talking Jesus, which is us and Hope Together, 6-way partnership. We mentioned earlier some of the Talking Jesus stats from the research that came out just last year. It's hugely enthusing and encouraging for people looking at what does personal witness look like. And so against the backdrop of the national statistics, we have a personal workbook, which if you're in a prayer triplet or a small group, your church might want to use those. And the next slide shows us that actually for your church, there's also something called the Evangelism Health Check, which you might want to mention again to other leaders, your minister, or if that's you, then actually it's a 5-minute audit where on a smartphone or printed out on paper, you can do a 5-minute survey, 5 questions or 10 questions to just basically map the landscape of your church. How do we feel about our own personal evangelism? Do we have the opportunities? What are the barriers? How can we skill up ourselves and actually just be bolder and braver sometimes to just in the everyday conversations make Jesus known? So there's loads there from the Talking Jesus partnership that might encourage and equip you over the coming season. We also got a couple of other resources for you. We've talked a lot about relationships and the power of friendships, haven't we, in our toddler group context and well beyond. And a colleague of mine, Phil Knox, has just recently launched this brilliant book talking about exactly that. It's called The Best of Friends. It's all about looking at this landscape, the current context of isolation that so many of our individuals, our families, our friends find themselves in. So this book is all about lots of stories and case studies of how we use the power of friendship to really go deeper, that it's about conversation, not about conversion, but just getting alongside the people in our surroundings and seeing where God's put us to make a difference. So The Best of Friends, I can thoroughly recommend to you. Just 2 other things, if we can go on to the next slide, please. One is we'd love to invite you to come to to join us for webinars and some follow-ups. We're looking at this new resource from the EA called Time to Talk. It's basically about how we look at sex and relationships, how we look at the school, primary school or secondary school agenda, and how we respond as Christian parents, and getting alongside our young people. If we recognise that the option to be silent is not a good option, we need to be speaking to our young people, then we just hope that this resource will again enable, equip, shed some light and information and give some top tips as to how to get alongside our children, our young people, age appropriately, speak about some of the big topics around sex education and relationships. So there's that as well from the EA. And just lastly, an invitation from myself and from Rachel from EA and Hope together at the end of March, Saturday 25th of March. We have this online hour and a half. We'd love you to come and join us. We have the very brilliant Patrick Dixon who's coming to join us for this online conversation about mission evangelism, looking at coming out of COVID and 4 signs for the church that impact our mission at this time. So that's free to sign up. We'd love you to join us for that, as you can see, on Saturday the 25th of March. So loads to get involved in. Rachel, tell us about some things coming out from Hope Together as well that might serve this network.
I think Sammy's starting.
Oh.
Over to Sammy.
Amazing. So I have 2 things to show you. One is something that is perfect for you to be starting and being intentional about faith conversations with non-Christians. It's our magazine, but I'll do Jesus Fixes Things first. So this is our new book in the Happy Land series, Jesus Fixes Things. It's the story of Easter. It's out now. If you were here at the start, you saw a little clip of the video. We've got a few tweaks to make to that, and then that will be available next week, already available on the God's Big Story resource page on the Hope Together website. Our toddler group resources around Jesus Fixes Things from Bible Buds with the amazing Anna Martin. And there's also an to follow will be the animation and also an action song to the tune of If You're Happy and You Know It. One thing to say about Jesus Fixes Things is there's more text in it than Jesus to the Rescue. It tells the Easter story, but it does the what and the how. So, sorry, the what and the why. So it tells the what of the Easter story, but also the why, because it has to come at this through the lens of God's big story. Some of the pictures, some of the text you'll recognise from previous books, because the idea of this series is that it all weaves together. So the book's out now. Video is to come soon along with the song, but toddler group and church resources are available on our website. The book is £1 for bulk orders. We've also got our new Hope for All Easter magazine or spring magazine out now. If you are being intentional about faith opportunities with your toddler group, with your young families, this is perfect. There's lots of celebrities. Bear Grylls is on the cover. And it's a really good conversation starter. And the spring issue is all about loss and hope and Easter and well-being, because loss and hope and grief is part of our well-being. So we've got stories from Bear Grylls, from Catherine Jenkins, something about the Tour de France, something about the Eurovision, Louis Theroux interviewing Stormzy. So that's often a really good giveaway for our non-Christian friends and families. Rachel Jordan-Wolf, over to you.
Great. So someone's asking how you get the magazine. You get the magazine on the shop. That's Hope Together. So if you go to hopetogether.org.uk, you can see, you can find all of this on the shop. And breaking news for you, we also have Matthew's Gospel for the coronation. That will be our front cover of the Matthew's Gospel that you can give out in coronation events. So if you're running a coronation party, you'll be able to get these to give out to friends and neighbours and people in your communities. They'll be good for schools as well. So that will be coming very soon, but we've just finalised that front cover. I think that is the end of the notices. I think everybody loves notices, and it wouldn't be the same without them. Sammy, you've got one last notice.
I've got one last notice. We'd love to see you all back next time. Our next Talking Toddlers session is on Thursday, the 6th of July. We're just trialing Thursdays at the moment, 10 till 11:30. Now, that's going to be on summer mission opportunities. We're hoping to have the inspirational Caroline Montgomery with us, who runs a very different type of toddler group called Refresh in South London. And we'd love to hear your summer mission opportunities. To hear about that, please sign up to our Talking Toddlers database. When you sign up to a Talking Toddlers, we have permission to contact you about that one beforehand and afterwards. So we will be sending you the link to the video recording and all the resources we've shared including the PowerPoint slides of stats. But to contact you about future webinars, you need to be on our database. So when we contact you next week with the video recording and the resources from today, there'll be a link to sign up on our database. Please sign up there. You're not signing your life away, we promise. And then we can let you know about the 6th of July webinar in the summer to resource you for, yeah, those sunny days of summer when we can get out there with families and make the most of the mission opportunities that we have. That, I think, really is the last notice.
Fantastic, Sammy. Are you going to pray for us or shall I pray us out? I'm going to pray for you all as we come up to Easter, all the opportunities that you have coming up. Lord God, we thank you so much for today. We thank you that we could be together. Lord, I thank you for each and every person here who's part of your amazing team who are reaching out in this country right now to an amazing coming generation. Jesus, we pray for Easter. May it be a moment where many people stop, reflect and think. Lord, I pray for the children who are going to hear about your death and resurrection. I pray for their parents. Jesus, may they be drawn closer to you and the hope of eternal life and the hope of resurrection and the hope of life transformation now. Jesus, would you work through us and in us, we pray, right across this country. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. We can't wait to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.